for me, it's always been wondering, like, what am I capable of? Like when I walk away from whether it be, cross-country skiing, or mountain biking or running, it's like, what can I do? And I think that's like a really powerful thing to, like, when you get to the point where you've like reached your limit and you find those limits, you're like, this is what I can do.
Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspects of running and what helps people to achieve success, however they define it, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode. Tracksmith just released their spring collection, and as the seasons shift yet again, I'm proud to continue this partnership with them. Tracksmith is a brand for committed runners like you and me, people who know that the best part of a busy day is squeezing in a workout. They offer products for training, racing, and rest days, which you know I'm a fan of, and create experiences that make running more rewarding, more connected, and more meaningful. Visit tracksmith.com/forthelongrun to see some of my favorite pieces, and all orders with the code FORTHELONGRUN, all one word, will receive free shipping, and 5% of your purchase amount will be donated to the Michael J. Fox Foundation to help find a cure and support those living with Parkinson's. This episode is brought to you by Freedom Solar, the company I'm using to go solar on my house. When I first started looking into solar, I thought it would be a clunky and expensive process. Freedom Solar walked me through the economics of it, where if you choose financing, you can potentially be up $50 a month every month, starting the day you turn your system on. With no down payment required, solar not only adds value to your home and is great for the environment, but allows you to save money from day one. Freedom Solar operates in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida, but there are plenty of other great options nationwide. Welcome back. I have Will Bodewes joining me from Fort Collins. Will, thanks for taking some time to chat today.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited.
Likewise. So who is Will?
Gosh,
We're going to dive right into it.
Yeah, going with the hard question right away there. That's a tough one to answer, but I think, probably what I think of myself as more of like a generalist. I've done a lot of different things. Over, my life. I'm 24 years old, but I went to school. I was a cross-country skier, skied Division I, went to NCAAs for that. So that was kind of my highlight, my focus of like the first part of my life. And then, graduated school and started my own company, and I've been going through the startup world in that aspect. And I've also been really, passionate about just working out, and especially in terms of like endurance athletics. Last year, I did the Colorado Trail Race, which is a 500-mile mountain bike race from Denver to Durango, and I got second in that. That was pretty epic. So yeah, just a bunch of different things. I really enjoy running, really enjoy cross-country skiing, pretty much anything outdoors where you're doing endurance and kind of pushing yourself to your limits, I guess.
Very cool. I love the overlap between endurance sport and entrepreneurship. Maybe let's start there. I'm curious, what got you into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's something that I've always been interested in ever since I was like 8th grade, I think. It's my dad's a business owner. He's a veterinarian, and I got to kind of watch him grow up as I grew up, and he started his own business from scratch. And I think that was just like really inspiring to be like, you can just kind of create this, business and run it exactly the way you want it to be run. And I think that was cool, but I've always also always kind of been making things and messing around with just different electronics, different, hardware stuff. And I've always thought that the idea of creating something that hasn't been out there and then bringing it to market and seeing if people want it, I thought that was a really cool concept.
It's sort of like the building of fitness, right?
Right.
So do you see the overlap? Do you feel the overlap, or is it just something that is natural for you?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's the entrepreneurial path that has got a lot of overlap with, like the fitness and athletic, mindset that I've taken. Whereas you set goals for, your sport, or, for, you want to run a certain marathon pace, whatever. And you don't really know if you're going to be able to do that. And, it just kind of comes down to just putting in the work and then believing that, you're going to be able to get to that goal, whatever that may be. And I think that that's, really helped me deal with some of the, failures along the way, some of the things that haven't gone the way I wanted it to. Is you look at it more of a process than more of a, you fail once and then like you don't meet your time once and then it's all over. It's like, well, you don't get it this time, but you keep moving forward, keep making progress, and eventually you'll get to that end goal.
Definitely. So I was looking at your company, Spoke Sound, and what I find to be so interesting is how you describe that it was born out of the frustration that good audio is oftentimes neglected from the rooms we use most because put simply, speakers are ugly. So it's so cool that like there's so much innovation that's happening where people are trying to create problems and then solve them. And a truly successful company can only be born out of you're actually solving a problem that already exists, right? Like the I don't need to come up with an example for it, but it's great that that was your decision-making process. So I'm curious, like, what was the genesis of that?
Yeah, well, it actually started back in college. So I was like, I had 3 other roommates, and I moved in, and I've always been a fan of audio, so I have my big speaker set up, and I tried to set it up all around my kitchen. And my roommates got over and they're like, yeah, that's not going to fly. Like, you can't have these like big, ugly speakers, everywhere. And I was like, well, I want to listen to music while I like cook dinner and hang out. Cause I spend, a good chunk of my time in the kitchen. And they basically said no. And I was like, okay, well, this is the problem. Like, I want to listen to music here. I don't want to spend thousands of dollars for like a ceiling installation. And especially in a rental apartment, that would make no sense. And so, I kind of was like, I want to have a good audio system in my kitchen. And that's kind of what started the idea. And I realized that, it wasn't the kitchen that was the problem. There's a lot of places where you would find that speakers, just didn't fit into the aesthetics. And so I had been doing, a little bit of research on, speakers and physics and stuff like that, and kind of stumbled onto a technology that basically would allow you to create a good sounding speaker in a very shallow frame and just kind of hang it on your wall. And so, you have a photo right behind you there. And so that's kind of the inspiration, is like you have something that is kind of a dual purpose. It's like everyone's got pictures on the wall. Well, let's kind of make them useful. And so that was kind of the whole process of how I started with Spoke Sound.
I love that. I've got like 8 Alexas in my house, and I find it creepy that it's always listening to me. And yes, it just perked up. And so I'd love to replace them with something that looks good. And like the wall over here could use some art. Is it commercially available?
Yeah. So, well, we've been doing like beta test selling for like our first ones. Cause we started, like, our company is a year ago in 10 days is when our company was like officially incorporated. Like, I've been doing research on it for like 3 years before that. And so we ran like a beta test where we had 40 of them that like our local community could buy. And that went super well. And then we kind of used that. And so we're launching a new model on Kickstarter in July. And so that one, like, we basically took all the feedback from that, and we're going to launch our like latest and greatest one for people that are like really looking for like the home audio solution. We do sell what we call like our Bluetooth version of our speaker. And that one is just like kind of geared towards like a personalized gift. So we put it at like a lower price point. But the new one's really cool. Like, I'm going to nerd out for a second, but it's got a mini subwoofer integrated in it. It can they link up all together throughout their house, so like you can play one in one room and the next room. They're all controlled by an app. They like integrate with a bunch of different streaming services. So it's just like super easy. They got Apple AirPlay 2 and all that, like, functionality that you kind of look for in a speaker system. And so, and they sound awesome. So those are the new ones. Those are coming out in July. We're launching it on the Kickstarter platform just because it's a really easy, like, pre-sale solution that they've already kind of got set up. So those are the ones that I'm like, if you're looking for a home audio solution, definitely get that. We do sell the ones like based for personalized gifts. They're Bluetooth. They sound good. But if you're looking for something that's going to be your like permanent speaker for like a home, like kind of theater, that's what we got coming.
Cool. Well, I want to jump back over to the endurance side of things, but I have to take a dig at you first. Yeah. You're a big audio guy and you're doing a podcast with AirPods.
I knew I was going to get in trouble with that. All of my my high quality microphones, they're like calibrated microphones, and they're all set up on my speakers right now. So I was running tests before I got this, and I was like, oh, I gotta go to this podcast, and so I just grabbed my AirPods and set it up like this. I know I knew you were going to say something about that too.
That's funny. I have these Shure mics. I don't know if you can see that. The people who are listening certainly can't. And I bought them right before. I love good audio quality, and I love like when something sounds really rich and really smooth.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought these in December, and then Omicron hit. I was like, oh, I'm gonna do all these live podcasts, and I've had these really nice mics, and nobody has used them yet, but excited to do some in person so that we can have, beers. This is in athletics, so it's not alcohol, but have some beers and do a podcast again.
For sure.
But jumping back to the endurance side of things, I got to ask about the skiing. I've gotten into skate skiing, and I find it so hard. And I grew up playing hockey, and so like I believe that I have a bit of an advantage over most, and I still find it really hard. So I'm curious, how did you get into skiing? And we might have to call this one for the long ski.
There you go. Well, I've been skiing since, I was like 3 years old. I mean, I think the thing about skiing is that it's hard. It takes a lot of, work to be like, to move. I mean, you gotta, you gotta really work on, pushing with your legs and balancing. And so it's kind of a whole, a bunch of different pieces that you got to put together. But so I got started with skiing, when I was like 3 or 4. I raced in high school. Competitively, I think I started racing when I was in 5th grade, and I just kept racing, kept pushing myself, and actually made it all the way up to about as high as you can go in college athletics to the NCAAs, like I mentioned earlier. And then it's just a sport that I love. I've, coached people. Right now I'm coaching our high school team, and then some masters, where I'm at right now. But it's just such an amazing sport. I think it's got such a great transfer over for like, runners or other endurance athletes, because, it's really truly a cardio based sport, and it's, low impact. So it's like you're looking for something to do in the winter that's not going to get you injured. I think cross country skiing can be a great way to kind of get that going. And it does take a little bit of learning, have a technique curve, but I think it's well worth it once you kind of get out there and try it.
For sure. It's wild. I moved here, and I was like, does everybody know how to cross country ski here? How is everybody so good at skate skiing?
Yeah. It's one of these things where it's like you start the first time, especially if you're like, like I've downhill skied, or I've done hockey and stuff like that. You start like, I'm going to be fine. And you get on there and you're like, this is not like anything else you've ever done. And it's one of those things, it takes time to get good at it, but really it's all about just being able to like balance on the leg. I mean, I think that's the key that I think most people kind of forget. They get stuck in the middle. So when you're skate skiing, you got your sides out, but your hips get like stuck over the middle of your ski, and you're not getting over the top of each ski. And so if you watch a good skier, they'll be balanced on one leg, they'll push, they'll be balanced on the next leg. And so, I mean, it's one of those things that just takes practice, you kind of got to get the feeling. And then once you get it, it does become easier.
Got it. My first time skate skiing this season was up in Breckenridge, and I had just run for 2 hours, and I was like unbelievably slow. And I went into the lodge afterwards, and I asked the woman at the desk, I was like, can you look at my skis and tell me if I need to like wax them or something? And she looked at them. She's like, damn, these are nicer than mine. Like the wax job is fantastic. Like, this is great. You should be fine. I was like, not what I was hoping to hear. Not very helpful.
Well, I think the 2 hour run right before it might have made that a little harder for you.
Maybe it was remarkably slow. So hopefully that was that. So I'm curious, the transition from skiing to mountain biking, you do some trail running. You mentioned the Colorado Trail. Where did an epic adventure like that come into the mix?
Yeah. So that started a long time ago when I was 13, 14, my dad took us on a kayak trip around Lake Superior. So that's our largest freshwater lake. It's, 1,200 miles around, and it took us 72 days. So when I was 14 years old, my brothers and I broke the world record for the youngest people to do that. And so we got our first taste of ultra endurance events, and that was in the form of a kayaking trip. Fast forward a year, we did 1,000 miles on the Pacific Crest Trail. Fast forward 2 more years, did the Continental Divide Trail, which is a 2,700 mile mountain bike trail from Canada to Mexico. And then I came back the next year and raced it. And so that's how that all got started my dad was always been really into that. And he's what got us into those kind of outdoor endurance events.
So at the beginning, day one, where's your mind at?
Yeah. So for me last year when I did it, I hadn't done an ultra endurance race for 3-4 years. So that was my first one in a while. So I was not super fresh. And I was like, well, I'm just going to go out and, kind of see what I can do. For really those outdoor endurance races, it's really just a race against yourself. There's other people there, but you're really just seeing okay, how long can I bike? How little sleep can I get? How much can I endure? And still kind of come out the other side of it. And so for me, that's what those races are about. It's not about who's going to come in first, who's going to come in second. It's what is the physical limit of my capability? And what can I do with it?
So how do you prep for something like that? Right. Because my intent with this podcast is understanding where does the mind go when things get hard, and how can the rest of us learn from people who do hard things so that we can all do hard things, right, and make it a bit more manageable. So curious how you've evolved and grown with the intent of the next month is going to be really hard, and not just the next training session, the next hour, the next 20-minute segment, the next month. How do you prep for that?
I mean, I think you do what you can. You get as physically fit as you can, but at some point you just kind of got to go out there and do it. I mean, that's what I found for myself. Last year when I did the Colorado Trail Race, I got second place overall. As a rookie, which is pretty hard to do. And I didn't train nearly as much as I probably should have. But it was something where I just went out there. And I just kind of said, okay, I would constantly kind of ask myself this question. And I think that going into it with a mindset of okay, is this can I go further? Can I physically go further? Can I go 15 minutes further? Can I go, a mile further? Whatever the denomination you break it down to, you'd say, can I go a little further? And that little, just asking yourself that internal question of okay, can I do one more of this? And if the answer is yes, you can physically do one more of this, then do one more of it, and that's kind of what I went into. And now, you get to the point where at some point you're too tired and you're I have to sleep. The last day so the way that I kind of slept through the schedule, because there's no mandatory stops on these, is I went the first day I slept 3 hours. The second day I slept 2 hours. The third day I slept 1 hour. And the last day I slept 15 minutes a couple of times. And so by the last day, I was getting to the point where I was falling asleep on my bike. I was seeing animals and stuff that weren't there. I was, there was just I was kind of hallucinating towards the end. And that was the point where I was okay, I do need to sleep. This is the point, I got there. And so I ended up taking a little naps and stuff like that.
I think the conscious choice aspect is interesting. You mentioned, I think you even said it, go one more. I did a podcast with Nick Bear, episode 174. Nick is a strength and power based athlete turned ultra runner turned sub 3 marathoner as a goal. And he is a big dude with a lot of muscle, running a lot and running fast and running far. And he's former military, and his whole perspective is whatever you think you can do, go one more. And that the body is capable of much more than the mind is. And so if you just will yourself to keep going, you can. But it has to be that choice. And I think that there's so much power in the choice of choosing to endure, right? I believe the definition of endurance is essentially along the lines of like the ability to persevere when the cost of persevering continues to get more and more expensive, you could say.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's some version of that that's true. That's like my paraphrase version. But it is true. It's like the cool thing about endurance sports is nobody's forcing you to do it. Nobody's making you bike across the state or anything like that, or around the lake or whatnot. And it's a conscious choice to like dive into the unknown and do things that are hard and do things that push you further than everyday life might.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious why? Why do you do it?
For me, I think it's mostly born out of curiosity. I think it's always been, what can I do? Cause it's like, you're given this body, and, for me, it's always been wondering, like, what am I capable of? Like when I walk away from whether it be, cross country skiing, or mountain biking or running, it's like, what can I do? And I think that's like a really powerful thing to, like, when you get to the point where you've like reached your limits and you find those limits, you're like, this is what I can do. I just think that's a cool feeling. It's I think it gives you a lot of confidence in other areas of your life too. When you're like, like when I'm starting my business and things aren't going well, and I keep, things keep breaking, things aren't working. I think that just having that kind of backgrounds of the endurance sport where it's like, can I do a little bit more? Can I push myself a little bit harder? I think that they all kind of tie together. And it's just like general curiosity is like, what can I do? And that's always been interesting to me.
On episode 200 of this podcast, I talked with David Roche, who's my coach, about curiosity in general. It's something we've talked a lot about, and it's something that I think that when an athlete has that, like, how far can I go? Where's my limit? Versus I want to do this, or I want to run a sub XYZ race. You're setting yourself up to be successful no matter what you do, because you're defining success as doing more, right? Success. Well, I'm curious, what is success to you?
I mean, I think, success to me is working towards a goal. I don't think that, like, I think a lot of people think of success as the finish line, but I think that in my life, it's always been, working towards something, having something worth working towards and continuing to work on that and iterate on that in your life. And so, if I ever get to the point where I've, accomplished all of my goals, I know that I'm going to be setting more, because for me, success is always just, I think it's chasing the limits, chasing, what you can do and wherever you're at in your life.
Okay, so we agree. Awesome. Thanks again to Tracksmith for supporting the podcast. I'm proud to partner with Tracksmith, and they're going to donate 5% of your order value to the Michael J. Fox Foundation for all orders, and you'll also get free shipping. The Michael J. Fox Foundation is dedicated to finding a cure and helping those living with Parkinson's. Both of my grandfathers have or had Parkinson's, and I'm grateful for Tracksmith's support for something so personal. Visit tracksmith.com/forthelongrun to see some of my favorite pieces, and all orders with the code FORTHELONGRUN will contribute towards this donation. I have been loving their Harrier long sleeve and Alston half tights in particular. Thanks again to Freedom Solar Power for supporting this episode of the podcast, as well as our desire for a greener energy source. The buying process was fascinating and so eye-opening, and I wanted to pay my learnings forward. If you're curious, message me on Instagram or Twitter, and I'd be happy to help you get in contact with some great resources. Freedom Solar operates in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida. My parents have the same panels from SunPower from a different company in Massachusetts. I mean, so I've done a lot of these podcasts now, and it's fascinating. At first, it was surprising that people were defining success in that way. And the more I asked that question, the more consistent of an answer I got. And these are people who are both subjectively and objectively successful by like conventional standards, societal standards. They've won a gold medal. They've started a business. They've achieved their marathon goal, whatever it is. They've won a race. But that's fleeting, right? Like, as you said, if you're solely focused on a specific outcome, like then what? Then what happens next? And so this like curiosity component, like to be successful at being curious, it means doing the work. And if you check the box every day, like that day is successful. And so you're much more in control of your ability to be successful, which I think is like, it's that lovely self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think my first, dealing with this problem was back in high school, and I had this goal where I wanted to win state. And then, my junior year, I did it. I won state, and then I was like, now what? Like, I did it. Like, I'm done. Like, I had a very goal focused, approach. And then as I kind of grew as an athlete and as a person, I think that transition from, okay, I want to do this specific thing to, okay, I want to do my best that I possibly can and, see where that leads me. And I think that as like an athlete, like, I saw a ton of my teammates, a ton of other college athletes who would get done with their sport and then they would stop exercising. They would stop working out, they would stop doing what they loved and they would just be like miserable. And I'm like, I think that's because they had a very, goal oriented approach to it. Whereas if you have, more of like a curiosity based approach, I think that's just a much more, fulfilling way to do athletics and in life in general sometimes.
Totally agree. So, what I find interesting is that normally this conversation is with people who are 35 years old or older. And the conclusion that we've generally come to is you have to fail a lot in order to get to this conversation that we're having, that like the ability to focus on process versus outcome is growth, like maturity. And you're 24. I had this same conversation with your girlfriend on the podcast, Holly, who's 20, she's 23.
Yeah.
And that was episode 203. And I was blown away by her ability to communicate a very similar but wildly different experience of process versus outcome. For her, running long, exploring the trails, understanding how it makes her a better human, all of this as a 23-year-old versus the conversations that I'm normally having with athletes that, they've been doing it for quite a while and they've experienced injuries or burnout or whatever. So how did you get to this already?
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly. That's a hard question. I think for me, athletics has like another purpose. Like I've had ADHD my entire life. And I think that in a lot of ways it's actually more of a blessing than a curse. Because I think it really helps, fuel the curiosity. But for me, I've kind of come to notice that like, if I don't work out, like I haven't gone 3 days in the last 8 years without working out. Like if I don't work out, I can't focus on anything. My brain starts to go, everywhere. And it's just a very terrible feeling. And so for me, I've kind of learned that like, I have to work out. And I think that the additional thing is like, I want to have a goal when I'm working out. Like I want to have something I'm working towards. And so, it's been hard to like leave cross country skiing behind, as, kind of my, that was like where my goals are focused. But I think I just transitioned it more to, okay, let's open up some other doors. Let's see what other areas I can push myself in, see where I can end up, how good I can end up being in whatever I choose to do.
But did you fail a bunch of times?
Oh yeah.
To get to this point? Let's talk about that. Tell me about a couple of failures you've experienced.
Yeah. So I mean, I've failed a lot in terms of like racing, like I would do not as well as I wanted. And I think that, I've kind of moved away from that approach of like, okay, I did bad in this race and that was a failure. And I did, poorly like this. But I think in terms of like, burnout, I gone a couple times where I've, overtrained a bit in a season or, trained really hard and then, not seen any, felt like gotten worse, I've gotten worse. And I think coming back from those, and, continue to approach athletics and endurance sports in the same way has been hard, but I think it's been easier because I know that I need to keep working out. So like, if I don't work out, like I don't feel good. So I need to keep working out. And I think that that's what's been like the consistent factor of like, okay, well, now if I'm going to be working out, like I'm going to keep trying to readjust my goals to try to be better. So yeah, I mean, that's, kind of some of the ways that I've failed in that aspect, I guess.
But I'm still curious on the fact that you're still like, I would still consider you like a younger athlete, despite the fact you've been doing it for your whole life, having already gotten to a place that you're in control of your own destiny. I think back to my own experience as a 24, 25, 26-year-old runner, and my entire identity was defined by my ability to run sub 3. And I hadn't run sub 3, and I failed at that 4 different times before finally doing it when I was 28. And I was so wrapped up in the outcome, and I was so focused on I must do this, otherwise I suck as a runner. Like, it wasn't that intense, but it was like pretty close. And I think a lot of that was a product of the community I was in. Everybody was really, really excellent, and really fast, and always doing a lot of intense things. But for me, so somebody once asked me, were those marathons a failure, or did you learn from them? And I was like, no, I didn't learn from them, because I didn't change my process. I didn't change my approach. I didn't change anything. I was just so cocky that I thought like I deserved it because I was putting in the work. And then I read the essay from Peter Bromka, "The Marathon Doesn't Owe You Anything." And that helped to change things a little bit. But still, like, I needed to fail 4 times over like a 4-year period before it finally sunk in that like this single track approach does not work. And it was, when I was 28 that I finally figured out like, okay, the best way to execute a good race is to focus on everything it took to get there and celebrate all of that versus looking at it as a test. And so I stood on that start line like the lightest I'd ever been, not physically, but mentally. Like, it didn't really matter what happened because everything else was already a success. But it took me a while to get there. And I'm happy for you that you're already there. How lucky.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that like, I've definitely had points in my career where I've, let the race define me. Like there's been many a times where, I did a ski race or a running race and I did bad and I felt awful. I felt terrible, about myself. But the races that like consistently across the board that I've done the best in terms of like performance wise, have always been when I approached the race of, I've done the work, like I've done everything I can to do as well as I possibly can today. Like I've done everything. And now it's just time to see if the cards line up. And I think walking into a race with that confidence of saying, okay, like I've done everything that I know I can do. And I'm just going to let the cards, land where they fall. I think that's the powerful, step in running. If you can get and running and skiing and any endurance sport, if you can get there, I think that's a sweet spot,
For sure. So fast forward 5 to 10 years, what are you really proud of accomplishing?
Probably the thing that I'm the most proud of, and it's the thing that I get the least credit for of like my bigger accomplishments, is when I was 17, I did the Tour Divide, which is a 2,700 mile mountain bike race. It's from Banff, Canada to Mexico, like I talked about. I was 17 years old. I did it by myself. And that was, an incredibly challenging thing to do. I ended up finishing, I got 9th place. It took me 17 days. I biked the last 37 hours without sleeping. And I averaged, I think, total of 8 hours of stops time, throughout the whole entire course. And so it was just, it just kind of built on itself. But that accomplishment, I think, unlocked so many doors, so many mental doors in my life of saying like, okay, like, what is possible? What can I do? And I think it's given me the confidence to be like, like I can do some of these things that I think most people, don't believe that they could do. Cause I mean, I went into that race, I went into it with, like I had ridden like 100 miles total that year. I just got done with track. Our team won the state championships, which is really awesome. But I literally went right from that, right to this bike race, and just the confidence that you can kind of build into it. And even if you're not ready to be able to kind of go for something like that and do well, was a huge accomplishment in, my mind, I guess, of just being able to complete that.
Very cool. So you said 17 days for the bike race?
Yeah. So 17 days, 10 hours and 11 minutes. Won't forget that one.
17 days, 10 hours, 11 minutes with 8 of those hours being stop time.
Well, eight hours a day. So 8 hours a day average, not the whole time.
I was going to say,
yeah. that would be unreal. But no, it was 8 hours average a day. So I mean, on average, I probably spend 4 to 5 hours sleeping, and the rest of the time was just fiddling around with refueling, getting food, fixing,
playing Wordle.
Yeah, mostly Wordle.
Yeah. Where did your head go when you were on like day 12 and you're like, all right, cool, I've got like another night of 4 hours of sleep?
Man. Everyone always asks me, like, was I bored? Was I bored throughout that? And I was never bored. I was always thinking about something. Most of the time I felt like I was thinking about how much I hated the state that I was in. I started in Canada, and I was like, all right, Canada is terrible. Like, that was the worst section. Then I got to Montana. I was like, no, Montana is terrible. That one's like the worst. And then I just kept going, and I kept getting harder and harder and worse and worse. And I think it was just like, when you're that age, like, you don't know, like, I didn't know how to quit things. Like I didn't quit. Like I'd never given up on anything before. And so I didn't know how to be like, okay, I'm done. Like, that's too hard. Like, I'm done. So I think coming into it just as a young age of not having the choice to give up is what helped me kind of through that. And I think it gets harder when you get older, and that's a weird thing is it gets, for me, it's gotten harder to not give up on things. It's like, I could, cause I could be sitting at home right now, but for me, I was like, I have to do this. Like, this is what I'm doing. Like, I have to finish it. So, yeah. I mean, a lot of times I was just, thinking about the trail, thinking about, looking around and watching as the world passed by, I guess.
Very cool. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, your relationship, or the relationship between ADHD and endurance sport for you. I was diagnosed with ADHD in 3rd grade, and it explained a hell of a lot to my parents about why I was the way I was, and why I am the way I am, and like what I'm able to be good at as a result. Curious about your relationship with that. Yeah.
So it's one of the things that, like I said, it's a blessing and a curse. It's definitely like plagued me a lot plagued me. I don't know. It's plagued me a lot, over the course of my life where, I've, seen, like, I just had like so many different areas that I've, been interested in. That's why you see me as like, I'm doing a bunch of things right now, like biking, skiing, entrepreneurship, and I got another, 100 other hobbies. And so I think the biggest challenge for me has been able to, kind of put that all together and stay focused on a single task. And I think, working out and endurance sports has been like kind of the compass that's kind of kept me on the right track. So if I don't work out, I notice it immediately. Like, I didn't work out this morning, and like, I'm all jittery right now, that everything is just kind of like, just comes in and out. But when I do exercise, and when I do, do a good hard workout, I'm able to focus on a task much better. I'm able to be, content with just kind of being and doing that one thing. And I think that's really where the working out ADHD puzzle has kind of come together for me.
I totally agree and absolutely feel the same way. People do not understand, like, I wear a ton of hats. I host a podcast. I have a full-time job that's demanding. I travel a lot, all these other things. And I'm like, I can't imagine not doing all of that all at once.
Right.
Like, exactly. It would be really boring, and they would all suffer as a result.
Right.
Yeah. And I find groundedness in the anchor point of endurance sport. And that's the most important part of the day, because if it doesn't happen, everything else is impacted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When did you figure that out?
Well, I think when I was little, I had a ton of energy, and some of my parents were like, you need to exercise, go send them off to ski practice. Like they kind of was like, you need to get the energy out. but I didn't really like consciously realize it until I think I was probably a sophomore in high school, where, I went a couple of days and I was like, I don't feel good. Like it's hard to explain how you feel, but it's like, I just don't feel like good. Like I can't do my homework. Like I can't, do the things that I want to do. And I just overall, just feel bad. And so, and once I like have kind of like grown older and kind of, been out of a sport for 2 years now, out of a structured sport, I've really, noticed that, where I'm like, I'm too busy. I'm not going to, go for a run or go for, bike today. And then I'll do that. And then I'll be like, well, I accomplished less today than I, despite having that extra hour and a half, I'd accomplished way less than I would have had I, been able to go for that run. And so I think that's kind of been the determining factor. Like, okay, like it got to happen. Like it's got to happen every day if you're going to be successful at what you're doing.
Totally. I think ADHD or not, I think the giving yourself an hour to do something that grounds you and gives you that like sustenance and sense of purpose and focus, as silly as that sounds, like I think it's critically important. Like I had a conversation with my boss a few years ago, and he's a big cyclist, mountain biker and all that, fat biking and gravel riding and all this stuff. And he was like, I get it. Like I must exercise every day. Mm-hmm. I must run every day, or, except Mondays. And it's, some people see it as selfish, but I think those people don't either. They don't want to see it as selfish, and they do, or they just don't understand. And I think it's the least selfish thing you can do to want to give or be the best version of yourself. And that starts with putting your own mask on first before helping those around you, as we get reminded on the airplanes, which I love.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it makes you it makes you a happier, a better person than the people around you. So to call it selfish, I think is a little naive, because it's like, if I didn't work out, like, I don't think you'd want to be around me very much. So it's like, I'm really helping you by doing this.
Totally. Well, this has been super fun. Definitely going to have to connect with you guys for a run or a ride or a ski, either up in Fort Collins or here in Boulder sometime soon. But for those who don't follow you yet and want to, where can we find you on social?
Yeah, so Instagram, it's at Will. Last name is Bodewes, which is pronounced Bodewes, but doesn't make any sense. So yeah, at Will Bodewes on Instagram, and that's pretty much the only one I use right now. I'm on LinkedIn as well, but that's not as cool. So,
well, that's where I found the description for your company. And what was the name of the company?
The name of the company is Spoke Sound, and I don't know if we said this or not, but we make speakers that look like pictures and hang on your wall. That's our like catchphrase of it. But
that's a fantastic elevator pitch. Very, very succinct. Well done. Will, thanks so much for taking some time to chat, and we'll see you out there.
Yeah, sounds good. It's good talking to you.
Likewise.
Take care.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf. Show notes have been written by Ruby Wiles and is managed by Emily Holland. It takes a village.